Season 3 is powered by crowdfunding. Welcome to Oceanside Chat, Light Beyond Generations. This podcast was created to inspire, motivate, and provide insight through industry professionals sharing personal stories, career aspirations, and practical advice. Our guest is Tyler Mincey, a co-founder and general partner at Baukunst, an early-stage venture capital fund investing at the frontiers of technology and design. Previously, Tyler was a leader in the iPhone and iPod team at Apple, a partner at the digital product studio Fictive Kin, and on the founding team at Pro Automation. He brings deep experience with the art and craft of product development to early-stage company building. Time to get your feet wet in the business world and join us down by the water as we have an Oceanside Chat. Season 3, Episode 3, Innovation Ecosystem versus Ecosystem.
Welcome to Oceanside Chat, Light Beyond Generation. I'm Helen Wang, the host and a creator of the program. 140 students from my Innovation to Market classes participate in today's production at the University of California, San Diego. The theme of our Season 3 podcast is Building Innovation Ecosystem with Entrepreneurial Skills. An ecosystem refers to a complex network or interconnected system that consists of people, organizations, and capital. I hope to bring this concept forward by exchange ideas with our guests and taking questions from our younger generations throughout the season. Oceanside Chat just turned 1 year old. We are fortunate to have had many distinguished guests and a supportive audience since the very first episode. To celebrate the anniversary, I'm thrilled to welcome back Tyler Mincey, now a co-founder and general partner at Baukunst, an early-stage venture capital firm. Tyler, welcome back.
Thank you. So excited to be back. Thanks for having me again.
You were in my class about a year ago. Do you remember the date?
I do. I think it was the 11th November.
You have started writing a new chapter since we met last time. Do you have a special announcement to share with us, both professional and personal?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got news in both areas. Personally, we welcomed a new family member into the world. I have a 4-month-old daughter at home in addition to our 2.5-year-old son. That was a big development. Everyone's happy and healthy and a little bit sleepy these days, but that's been great and just a total joy. Being a parent's awesome, but a lot of hard work too.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Professionally, I also started a new thing. Last time we talked, I was 100% focused on a previous VC fund, Bolt, that was very focused on investing in connected devices, kind of this intersection of the physical and digital world. I'm still a part of that fund. We still have lots of follow-on capital to deploy and a board member on lots of our portfolio companies. But just this spring, we announced that we were launching a new fund with some of my partners at Bolt that's called Baukunst, that's taking some of the model of Bolt that we know very well, but kind of tweaking our focus and model into being something we're more excited about for the future going forward. And so we're 100% focused on helping founders start companies at the very beginning of their journey. So we're a pre-seed lead investor. And because we invest so early, our investment strategy more with a who than a what. And so we invest in creative technologists that are building companies at the frontiers of design and technology. It's really about who for us. Creative technologists are people that combine deep technical expertise with a special talent in design and applying that technology to meaningful problems in the world around us. We really think those people are kind of situated at the intersection of change, both on the kind of market and demand side of the world and external factors, as well as technology, and are really just best positioned to have their finger on the pulse of change and have insight around what to build for the future. So we're very hardware friendly in what we're investing these days, but not as hardware defined as we were at Bolt.
Is there any special meaning to the name that you picked?
Baukunst itself means the art of building. It's one of those fun German compound words. Bau is the root that means building, and Kunst is art or craft. Similar root to Bauhaus, if you're familiar with that interdisciplinary educational organization back in the turn of the century. And so for us, that really just encapsulates what it's like to build a company in the early days. Before you have a product in market and there's not revenue numbers and traction, you're not living in a spreadsheet with your CFO. It's a little bit more art than science at that stage. And people are operating on intuition with small trusted teams. And that really speaks to both the art and the craft of what it takes to lay the foundation for a big business. And so we really like that term, and it kind of encapsulated just our belief around what our job is.
Yeah, that's a very interesting story behind it. What's the size of the fund?
We're a $100 million fund, which is a very large fund for a pre-seed focused investor. I think people have told us that we are the largest debut fund for a pre-seed fund ever, which is really exciting. I think it's very timely as far as the funding landscape for a company that's really laser focused on early stage company building in that way, and just something we and myself certainly love doing.
What are your investment strategy at your firm? Can you give us some example?
One thing at a high level is just the stage we invest. And there are other strategies, but ours is a very high conviction early stage philosophy. So we invest in pre-seed rounds. That's usually like first institutional money that our founders raise. There's lots of people that invest at that stage too, but tend to write like smaller supporting checks, or they'll invest in many different companies and kind of see which ones are doing well. It's a little bit more of like a throw a bunch of stuff at the wall, see what sticks strategy. And ours is really about making more convicted bets for a relatively small number of companies, and then doubling down on support and really trying to help them be successful. And then when we do that, we see the funds perform very well. And that's really all a kind of a function of that strategy. You can kind of turn those knobs in unhealthy directions, like either too small checks or too big checks. But we think we kind of have that like Goldilocks, like right size for us that really helps us be extremely close collaborative partners and put a ton of time and effort into the companies we back, but at the same time investing in enough of them that we have like diversity in the portfolio, and also build like a community and ecosystem of founders that support each other as well.
What is driving your investment decision? Is there certain things that you're looking for?
I would say that the first being a large and timely market opportunity is important. And then like double clicking on the timely bit, like being able to answer why now and to articulate what macro trends, both on the technology and the demand side of your company, you're writing and are specifically designing your strategy around. And the third thing being the quality of the founders too, like why they have the perfect set of experiences and abilities and insights to really pursue this opportunity and to be the best in the world at it.
When you say 80% of the time you actually decided based on who are the funding team or the funders, especially at the pre-seed, as you mentioned, there may not be a real product. There's really no market data to validate this product. So what are the specific things you're looking from the founder that could gain your trust and could build their credibility for you to finally decide to invest?
For sure. We like to kind of convince ourselves why they thought of this strategy or thought of this like opportunity in a unique way. That usually comes out of some earned insight from their previous experience or something they gained from their interdisciplinary background. But it's usually this like interesting like spark that's coming across maybe unrelated market or industry that's jumping over to a new one, and it's a new way of doing business there. And that usually comes from those interdisciplinary people. So we're oftentimes looking for that in the backgrounds of the founder. And then we're also looking at their innate talents, things like their ability to be visionary and communicate that vision, their ability to learn quickly, like a bias for action, being collaborative. We think all those things are the most important in people doing a fundamentally new thing and tackling a new problem. It's really all about learning and blazing a trail as opposed to following a more established playbook.
And I know your firm also invests in younger generation, right, who may not have a lot of experience. Can you give us an example?
Yeah, there's lots of founders. Like there's a company, Pair Eyewear, that makes a system of eyeglasses with customizable frames, both for kind of adults and for children. We backed those founders, Nathan and Sophia, right out of school. And they were just extremely dynamic, smart, high energy people. And I think there's the trade-offs with a brand new founder. Sometimes what they lack in experience, they overcompensate for with energy and almost like a healthy naivete. Like if you're approaching something with a fresh set of eyes, you think differently and you'll not consider certain constraints immovable. And I think those people can oftentimes come up with more innovative and creative solutions than people that are actually have deep expertise in the area.
So Tyler, in your opinion, what is the venture capital community doing to help sustainability? And is there specific things that your company is doing?
Yeah, a ton. I think that the venture community at large really believes that if we don't do anything, the world's going to be in a bad place. There's a lot of desire to try to help things. And there's a belief that the existing companies that are out there today, the Fortune 500 companies, are going to maybe help, but are not going to be able to get us on a good track by themselves. And that some large share of that is going to need to be shouldered by new companies. And so they're looking to back those companies. They, of course, also think that there's a business case for them and a market opportunity, but they see that as being a flywheel where if you can make a successful company that's making money and pour those resources and capital back into scaling their impact, that's just going to scale the sustainability benefit as well. So there's absolutely that desire. But I think the big qualifying thing is that sustainability value proposition can't just be an add-on. It can't just be like not the core business model and something that you're going to do like on the side and be okay with lower margins or something. I think it has to be really key and be aligned from an incentives perspective with somebody's core business model. Like your business has to be better the more sustainable you are. And so I think people are really looking for places where that overlaps. But there's tons of stuff in more clean energy generation and helping improve our food supply and sources of nutrients with less fertilizers and less amounts of water. There's lots of things happening with kind of carbon capture, like lots of different areas, I think, where those things are clearly aligning and there's a lot of interest in the funding community.
So what prevents getting more investment into sustainability? And what takes to boost more investment there?
It's a good question. Oftentimes it's just good ideas. There's definitely capital out there hungry to invest in good ideas, but it's still hard. Reinventing businesses with sustainability in mind is a big task. And so there are also lots of like not great ideas floating around, or maybe ideas that are just a little bit too early. Some of the ideas, it's just a timing question. And there's something on the kind of core technology level that needs to be developed first. I think that's a big area where things can help. And there's also lots of ideas that face other government, societal, regulatory obstacles as well, too. And so I think like working on some of those other systematic structural things to unblock sustainable solutions can be helpful too. It's a pretty abstract comment, but I think there's a lot of external factors that need to change first before it makes sense to start a business.
What do you mean by too early?
Sometimes people like can have great ideas where the technology is not ready yet. The thing that immediately comes to mind is there's a great documentary about General Magic that's out now that some folks like we worked with at Apple were a part of back in the day. They like 100% had the idea for what a smartphone looked like, down to a T, like perfect description of it. But the core building blocks of building a product like that and the kind of market readiness for it just weren't there. And so they had the concept, they tried to develop the exact right thing, but it was in a business context that wasn't super functional with building blocks that just kind of didn't work. And so they just didn't succeed because the environment and the material they had to work with just wasn't ready yet. But fast forward 15 years later, and all those things came together, and you can see what happened.
After graduating from Princeton with a BS in mechanical and aerospace engineer, and then Stanford with MS in mechanical engineering, you started your professional career at Apple as an engineering program manager for iPhone in 2006. How did your early years experience with Apple shaped you?
Well, it was just an absolutely amazing place to work at the time. I joined the iPod group. That was all that it was known externally at the time. And it was still when the iPhone was in its black ops mode, basically. And so I got to join that small team and really work with the full support of the company at our back, but really as a startup inside the larger company. And so we were just working in very small, trusted, expert teams. I was fortunate to be given a lot of responsibility and trust as a young person to really bust ass and work hard. And I think the feeling was that it was your job until you lost it, basically. So there was a lot of kind of heavy consequence like hanging over your head all the time, but really lots of positive motivation from extremely talented team members. And it really just taught me how you can move mountains with a small team if you really have a high work ethic and a very clear vision that everyone's working behind. So we still got in half full conference rooms with Steve when he was giving pep talks to the whole core team. It was an incredibly small group of people. And he was saying that it reminded him of the original Mac teams and that more people in the company would be working on this type of product than anything else. And it was hard to believe at the time, but we totally called a shot and was very inspirational and something that stuck with me.
When a student asks the question, what's your experience designing the product with Steve and Johnny Ive? What is the biggest challenge?
There was a time cover at the time with Steve holding the phone that said invention of the year. And that was always kind of funny to me to think of that product just as this like single light bulb moment that like was invented and happened in 1 year. But really it was the confluence of all of these different technologies that were coming together over the course of 10 years, everything from cellular radios to touchscreens to miniaturization technology and low power electronics, as well as software interfaces, like understanding just different paradigms of direct content manipulation, having more software-driven flexible interfaces versus fixed physical buttons. So there's really all of these building blocks that have been percolating for decades. They really all came together in a very specific product vision that bundled all of these things together in an easy to use, easy to understand way. And so for me, that gave me firsthand experience to how powerful product design can be when you really combine both sides of that coin. If you just go and design experiences in a vacuum, oftentimes those aren't practical or not well informed by the kind of building blocks of the world around you. But in the same way, if you just are focused on technologies and you go around looking for applications of those technologies, you oftentimes building things that nobody really wants. So I think it's really important to have deep expertise in both of those things and can balance the magic of putting them all together in something that's actually going to exist in the real world and be impactful for people.
The objective of this class is really build entrepreneurial mindset. In your opinion, what is an entrepreneurial mindset?
An entrepreneurial mindset, I think, is really about investing in yourself. I think successful entrepreneurs really believe in their own capabilities, but also like know their own shortcomings too. They're constantly learning, attacking new problems, and like believe in themselves if they're equipped with resources that they can go and make an impact on the world and grow the pie for everybody involved. I think that sort of growth mindset is really key to what an entrepreneur is in my mind.
Given your experience working at the large company like Apple, as well as a small company that you have started yourself, worked for, or even the portfolio company right now that you invested in, I'm just curious, why is entrepreneurial mindset important?
Well, I think most entrepreneurs are just starting something new and they're looking to change the way that things are done. And I think that's just important for us all to get checked on the solutions in our day-to-day lives and how we go about doing work in business. I feel extremely fortunate to be surrounded by entrepreneurs, and I think they make our lives better at a fundamental level.
Would you say that's equally important, regardless whether you work for a large company versus you start your own?
No, not necessarily. I mean, people really fall into different buckets. I think it's a spectrum, and there's lots of people that are not entrepreneurs and are amazing too. There's people who love optimizing things. They like to look at well-established systems, like debug problems, look for ways for continuous improvement and to scale them up. I don't necessarily think of those people as being entrepreneurial all the time, but those people are amazing and we like need those people. I think it's important just to kind of know and be real about what your interests are. It's fine that not everyone wants to start something and that they actually operate better in a different mode.
We discussed the phenomenon of innovation in large companies versus small ventures in this class. In other words, entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship. We surveyed the entire class. 51% of students want to join a big corporation after graduation. 30% think of starting their own venture, and then 19% prefer to join small firms. So in 2011, after witnessing the foundation success of iPhone and its halo effect for Apple, you moved to start your own journey. Given your experience from both sides of the innovation, I'm curious about your thoughts and advice for our students. Which route should they go?
Well, like so many things, I think the answer is it depends. Both can be great and have different trade-offs that people need to consider. Working at a big company can be wonderful because it can be a fast-tracked educational experience where you can work alongside mentors who have been experts in their field for decades and can really teach you and short circuit some of the learnings and teach you how to do things at a very high level that maybe would take you much longer, an order of magnitude longer on your own sometimes. So that can be a great path for you. But I think if you're thinking about joining a big company, you really have to know, like, what is the team I'm going to work on? Who are going to be those mentors for me? And if you're not sure you're going to have those, or you show up and you find out that you don't have those, you should really quickly think about getting in a different place. On the other side of things, there's no substitute for learning for actually doing the job itself. And so jumping into an entrepreneurial role, either starting something yourself or working at a small company, can be amazing. If you're the only person doing something and you're directly responsible for it, it can be like learning from a fire hose too. But at the same time, you're doing that sometimes without the direct mentorship of people you would have at a larger company. To do that well, you really have to like seek out advisors or mentors that bring expertise in that space. And don't just purely try to do it yourself and reinvent the wheel. It's important to strike a balance there, but it really depends on people's personalities and the specific opportunities that are around them.
I want to double click on terms of the founder. What comes to your mind when I mention founding team?
The founding team for us are the core team that we back in a new venture. The founders themselves need to be the kind of cheerleaders and spirit animal and lifeblood of their company for sometimes its whole lifetime, at least the first handful of years. Really looking at those sometimes 1, 2, 3, 4 people and really seeing like what unique insights they bring to the problem they're trying to address that may have come from like earned insights or interdisciplinary experience they've had in their background, and how they fit together as a small team and puzzle pieces that complement each other are a really important part of our investment process. But there's so many twists and turns in a startup's lifetime. You usually don't know exactly your customer is in the beginning. You don't know exactly what your product should be. So it's more important to invest in people who are going to figure that out than investing in one specific strategy that you pretend is going to be the right one.
From your website, I found this. The bottom line is connecting with our founders, like entering into a marriage on both an emotional and a financial basis. So I wanted to talk more about what that really means.
Yeah. So for us as investors, networking is almost our whole job as far as finding investment opportunities. It's a huge deal. When we invest, it's oftentimes at company formation. So we have to know the founders. We really like it when founding teams are already formed and are coming to us as a group. If we're having to help find a founding team, we can do that in some really special cases and have been very successful in that. But that can tend to be a little bit forced sometimes. Even the whole idea of like founder dating, where it feels like a little bit more like a shotgun marriage. It's like, I've only known my co-founder for a couple months. There's just a very high risk that relationship is not going to go well for a number of reasons. It can go great sometimes, but usually co-founders, I think, have a fairly long history of either being friends or co-workers and have a professional history together where they're highly confident that they can work at an interpersonal level and that they're effective professionally as a team.
So, what are the goals of the funding team?
For founders that we like to back, they're typically very mission oriented. For founders that are primarily looking to financially benefit from their startup journey, I think can sometimes not have the mission driven drive to like inspire teams to hire well, to pull them through the difficult times of a startup journey. And so for us, we really like to find people whose fuel to the fire is something different. It's about changing the world, about having a positive impact on people's lives. And then that thing also happens to have a good business model that like can make money, that can be a flywheel to bring more resources into the company and help scale their impact. But they usually need to be mission first and financial impact second. You still have to do both of those things, but if you don't have the mission a part of the equation, it just doesn't go well. So for me, that's the motivation that I'm really looking for.
Can you give a few examples of the characteristics of a great funding team?
Oh, yeah. It can be very lonely as a single founder. We have a preference for founders, not founder. Usually it's very helpful to have a sounding board. And also, it's rare that all of the skills to lead a company exist in one human. And so oftentimes groups of founders can have complementary abilities and expertise that support each other. That's oftentimes a big part of what we're looking for. We index a little bit more towards people that have innate abilities to iterate quickly and to learn very rapidly, to incorporate and seek out diverse advice from people around them, as opposed to people that are like extremely deep subject domain experts. Like that can be a nice compliment, but not a substitute for the other stuff. Because the companies that we're investing in, like the whole reason they're interesting is because they're doing something new. It's about writing a new playbook, not just running an old playbook from a previous company. And so we're really looking for people that are more dynamic and are going to blaze their own trail as opposed to people who just know a well-trodden path in the past. And so that's a big part of what we're kind of analyzing when we're talking to people.
So the right skills as well as hands-on approach, more of a problem solver. What about ego?
So ego is an interesting one. You have to be a little bit crazy, like to be a founder sometimes, right? Like you have to believe in your vision of the world so much that you have to go do this. In many cases, like people would be better off financially just going to work at a big company for 10 years as opposed to running their startup for 10 years. But again, these people are doing it to change the world. And so you have to have a fair amount of ego to really believe that. But for us, I think you can have way too much ego where you just believe that you're going to be dictating your vision of the world to everyone and that's going to work. And that's usually not the case. I think the founders that are successful believe in the mission and their vision very deeply, but know how to work with people and accomplish things as a group. I think your impact on the world is dependent on your ability to work with other people and to get them aligned and inspired on your vision. So you have to be successful at doing that. People that combine the vision, but also an approach that's very team focused tend to succeed better.
As a co-founder and general partner, could you tell us the marriage story at Baukunst?
Well, for us, in some ways, it was easy because my three other partners, Axel, Kate, Matt, and myself, had been working together anywhere between 4 and 8 years doing early stage investing together. So we really had that experience of being trusted colleagues for a long time and really meshed on an interpersonal level, trust level, and we knew we were effective as a group. And we often joke, like, what else were we going to do? Like, we all love our jobs so much that like we knew we wanted to start something new and do it together as a team. And it just had that sense of almost like inevitability. It's like, we're definitely doing this together, right? And any process of starting something new is hard. And we did have to work very hard to evolve our strategy, to find like-minded LPs, investors for the fund. That took a long time and took a lot of work, but it was almost like we got to do this. It was almost never a question. And when you have that sense of inevitability getting out of bed in the morning, that's just always a good signal.
So as a venture capitalist, you are in the business of venture investment, but would you also say you're in the business of innovation?
Definitely, absolutely. Yeah. We really talk about, again, in our name, Baukunst, the art of building. Like what we're doing is advancing the art of building. Like we really see company building as a craft in and of itself. And I think about companies as my product that I develop now. There's always a new way of doing things that's constantly evolving with the kind of external factors and where we're trying to push things forward. So absolutely, I think there's innovation in the way companies are founded right now. There's innovation in how they operate around compensation transparency and remote work and HR policies and diverse team building, where there's really some cutting edge business work that's happening. It's really exciting. And that stuff does trickle down into the products they're developing as well. There's lots of innovation happening in business model as well as technology and product definition. Just startups themselves are actually fairly progressive too. There's more, I think, employee ownership and kind of shareholder value than there are at larger established companies. As more people join startups and as startups have more equitable compensation for companies over time, the financial rewards and the value created by startups, I think, tend to flow back into that community of entrepreneurs and builders in a really healthy way. That's really an engine for innovation.
What would you say the main characters of a high-performing innovative team?
Yeah, so being a team is definitely a huge starting factor. Like it usually needs to be a group of people. They need to have a high level of trust and mutual input. If somebody's dominating a conversation or a planning path too much, that can really be a detriment. I think people have to be very observant and empathetic. Sometimes people are designing a product specifically for themselves, but usually they're designing a product for a larger group of people and hopefully a well-defined customer segment. But there's a lot of discovery and user research and listening to whoever you're building the product for that needs to happen to be successful. High quality teams just tend to be innately good at that. They soak up insights very well. They're able to sort through the signal and the noise of what feedback they receive from people. And they actively seek out that feedback and incorporate it as opposed to kind of shy away from it or tend not to look for it in the first place. I think speed is for sure a feature of a high performing team. Again, it's rare that you just get it right the first time. And the people that win usually just try a lot and give themselves a lot of rolls of the dice or times at bat, however you want to say it. And so I think people that are just really quick tend to do well over time. They kind of give themselves a chance to make their own luck.
So when it comes to innovation and founding team for new venture, which do you think is more important? Homogeneous team whose member possesses the same or similar characteristics, or heterogeneous team, which means a group of people with a mix of knowledge, skill, and experience?
Definitely heterogeneous. Yeah, I think that sometimes homogenous teams can be like portrayed as being like more efficient or like faster or be able to get down to work more easily, but that's not the case. It feels like that's a totally like orthogonal measure of a group. Like you can have a heterogeneous team that works just the same way. There's different things that drive that. So I'd pick the variety of like viewpoints any day of the week. I think that's going to make you smarter as a group and kind of be able to cherry pick what's the best of everyone's backgrounds and experiences.
I wanted to push this a little deeper because heterogeneous team inherited with diversity, right? You have different opinion, people coming from different background, creative ideas. But how does the decision-making process happen? I've been in those organizations that diversity is the foundation, but people cannot agree with each other.
Right. I think that doesn't have to be the case. Like diversity doesn't mean disagreement. I think you can design a process as a group and organize as a group where the knowledge of the people that are closest to the problem can bubble up and people can work on solutions. And sometimes you have to designate a leader or a decision maker, but their job is not to dictate the decision, but just to incorporate the feedback from the rest of the team. And sometimes have to make some hard choices and lean on their gut, but that's sort of their role in the organization. I totally think heterogeneous teams can have processes that are productive. I've seen tons of instances of that. So it's more of a process problem than it is a problem with the makeup of the group itself.
Perfect. That leads to my next question. I'm curious about your perspective about management style as well as leadership style. Management style specifically, people talk about micromanagement, like how detailed that you need it to be, as well as leadership style. There are participation, more democratic style, or people love to delegate, or people just orders to make a decision. If you have a choice for an ideal team that you like to invest in the name of innovation, what flavor would you like to have?
Yeah, I really like for myself and for most of my advice when I'm working with companies too, is to really be talent focused. You want to have A plus players on your team across the board. And so you want to design processes and have a management style that train A+ players, that make it a place where those people want to work and give them the trust to operate and to apply their expertise in the best way possible. So oftentimes that is more of a bottoms up approach where there's a lot of decision-making power given to the people that are closest to the problem. And then at a manager's level, you're really trying to focus on, do those experts have the resources and are they communicating the right way? And do we have the processes in place as a team to operate effectively? It's almost more of a support role for those people than it is the one expert at the top to like dictate the path and it just be handed down. That tends to not be a fun place to work for great people if you're just a cog in the machine and don't actually get to decide anything yourself. It doesn't really encourage independent thinking and growing as an individual too. So I think in those more tutorial organizations, they don't train good talent and they don't attract good talent as well.
So we talked about management style, about leadership style, what makes a strong funding team for a new venture. Assuming that we have a great funding team and a very innovative culture, what's the next for the entrepreneurial journey, right? If they're successful, then the company start growing. So can we talk about the evolution of company culture from early stage to the growing phase and then the transformational process of overcoming those growing pains?
Well, everything boils down to execution at some point if you have some of those starting components. So ultimately, the people that execute the quicker and find solutions the quickest and really take advantage of those the best end up winning. So it's fairly competitive and execution focused at some point for everyone. But I think a big component of that is having a good culture. There's this like balancing act where when you're a small team, like people are talking to each other and you sort of have almost an emergent culture that everyone understands and knows. And then as the team starts to grow, you definitely can't take that for granted. There's this process that usually needs to happen at some point in a company's lifetime where you document the culture a little bit more. You figure out how your internal processes like support that culture. I think one of the most important things people do is learn how to hire for that culture too. So there's like an explicit parts of the hiring process that evaluate fit to those cultural pieces, and they can pull that up into the team building process as early as possible. I think that stuff's really important. Some common mistakes is to like do that a little bit too early or too late, where it's not exactly, it's a little bit too heavy or you've missed the boat in establishing that culture. It also doesn't work where somebody just like dictates the culture and tries to shove it down to everyone too, because culture is not really a thing you can change, or like you can, but on a very long time scale. It's like turning a boat around. And so it's more of a thing you have to see what already exists in the team you have and document and highlight the parts that you really want to put on a pedestal and then feed that back into a hiring process. It's very hard to change culture on any time scale that matches what a startup is doing.
So I often use two analogies to help students understand the advancement of a company growth, therefore inevitable growing pains. One way to thinking about it, an entity is just like a person. So for example, each of us was born into a unique family. If we consider baby as a venture and the family as a funding team, that we share values as a family, but sometimes disagree with each other. So the baby goes to preschool, kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, and graduate from college and eventually join the workforce. So looking back, we have experienced so many different stages and grow into who we are today. But at the very stage, we are the same person, but different version of ourselves. So we make new friends and our network also evolves. To be successful and valuable, we must keep growing from learning and learn from values and acquire new skills to survive and thrive. The path to personal growth is similar to the track of company growth. That's the one way I'm thinking about. Don't resist the change of the culture, because when you grow the company, it's inevitable. Things will start changing. The other good one is the book written by LinkedIn founder Reid Hoffman. That in his book named Bliss Scaling, we also have an article this class is going to read. He defined 5 stages for company growth. So when the company has less than 10 employees, you're operating like a family. Everybody got to know each other very well. And then when the company grows, has tens of employees, you work as a tribe. So you might have a lead, but tribe works very different from a family. And then when the company grows to hundreds of employees, thinking of a village. Beyond that point, thinking of like a city, right? And then eventually, if you become a global company, there's tens of thousands of people. That's almost like you're running a nation. So that does require a different type of processy, culture, people talent in order to grow a company. And I'm curious, Tyler, what are some additional thoughts you might have?
Yeah, I think one of the most challenging things is you want to lay a foundation for a company that as it grows, like does have the flexibility to incorporate and embrace people that have slightly different values or viewpoints, but are aligned in the mission of the company itself. And anytime you get a group of people together, there's going to be differences and you really find common ground around your mission and what you're working on together too. And so even when we're talking about cultures, like the goal is not necessarily to have a monoculture where everyone is monolithic and exactly the same. The goal is to have some commonality where diverse people with different backgrounds and values and a plurality of interests can come together and still find common cause. And so I think you have to just be smart about that to make sure that you're not painting yourself into a corner with like an overly specific culture as well.
I'm going to quote something from your website. We believe groundbreaking work is most often not an isolated incident, but rather a product of a complex ecosystem and a sustained execution. Could you please elaborate on this by giving us some example?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that ecosystem versus ecosystem diagram I was talking about before. I think that a lot of companies that are really successful these days think about their users and their community as almost part of their tech stack. Like they don't think about just existing in a lab or a ivory tower and crafting their product and marketing it to people. It's really about bringing their users along on the journey and inspiring them along the way and turning them into advocates for their products and services and companies. I think that's true of companies like Bobby that makes an organic infant formula company. Have had an amazing group of mothers kind of involved with guiding company direction as well as being advocates for the product. It just feels different than like your more traditional CPG brand, that micro designing brand, just like putting it on shelves. When that happens, there's a real tangible difference. And I think that for me is sort of the exciting state of the art of company building right now.
Here comes another one from your website. We believe individual genius is overrepresented and the complex power of things is undervalued. But when it comes to innovation, I can think of many genius founders. Just to name a few: Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and more. These geniuses act as heroes to advance our society and the face of their companies. So it makes me wonder if it is the recipe for success.
I think a lot of that is very revisionist history where we tend to put one person on a pedestal, or that's how the traditional stories have often been told. Like, you don't have Apple without Steve Jobs, but you also don't have Apple probably without Woz, and you probably don't have Apple without the Homebrew Computer Club too. There's for sure like scenes of people developing those products and developing the technology and product vision there that somebody harnessed, but like it doesn't really happen without that full ecosystem there. If you don't have Xerox PARC, you don't have a lot of the Apple stuff as well. Obviously, there's lots of catalysts in the world of single great people that do make things happen and make maybe oversized contributions. But if anything, I bet we undervalue the contribution of those other collaborators and the scenes they came out of as well.
But practically speaking, right, first of all, many of them are the founders of the company. They also become sort of the face of the company. Is this by design? Is that easier for people to associate a particular breakthrough technology, disruptive technology to a person, a face of the company versus trying to remember, let's say there's tens of thousands of people behind the scene, right? What's your view about that?
Yeah, it really depends. I think different companies take different approaches to that. Sometimes the brands will be very accretive to a founder, and sometimes they can be like contained in the brand themselves. Even brands like Nike and Pixar now, like you know what they are, even though you may not know their CEO at any given point in time. And there's actually like a cross-generational thread of what those companies stand for that are greater than a founder or a particular executive.
Yeah, so actually, when we founded Oceanside Perspective, we had this internal debate. Obviously, I'm the founder, right? But if you go to our website, everywhere you go, there's no information about this particular person. So like the face of the company is not there. We obviously wanted to grow our company in the future. Hopefully there's many more people just like me on the platform. But there was a very thoughtful decision that we made is we're not going to use any one particular person and hope that Oceanside Perspective as a brand is going to go out there and representing certain value that this community believes. What you just said resonated a lot with me.
It depends though. Like sometimes that doesn't go well either. Like sometimes you are better off like having a very charismatic front person on a brand or a company too. So it really depends.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to start picking students' questions. There's a lot of questions. I hope to get most of them. Do you have a list of things that you're looking for when you decide which company to invest?
Yes and no. There's definitely some reasons to invest that are really about how good the founders are, what the market opportunity is, like whether they have capital efficient plans to grow. There's some of those things that are really important. And then there's a bunch of other kind of longer tail of due diligence things around like company hygiene and cleanliness of IP, founder personal references, and things like that you have to do that can be deal breakers, but they're not really the reason to invest in the same way. So it's a little bit of both. We're in the business of backing founders, not coming up with the ideas ourselves too. I don't sit around thinking about like, I think this would be a great company if it existed. Here's my idea of a product and company. Let me go find someone like that. For us, it's about like being a critic and analyzing people's ideas and visions.
What is the most common reason for the startup that you invested in but failed?
That's a good question. I really don't know if there's one specific common reason. It's usually a mixture. There can sometimes be like issues with founders where they don't get along or kind of lose conviction of what they're working on. But hopefully we do a good job of sussing most of that out in the kind of vetting due diligence process ourselves. That can happen, but that's not like super common for us in particular. Sometimes people's timing isn't right, right? Like people do experiment with what sounded like a good idea, and so some of the environments or building blocks aren't quite ready. So that's definitely another common one. Another one is just that like you kind of missed on market size. Like you thought that the small group of passionate users, you were hearing great things about your product. You just thought there were more of them out there in the world than there actually were. And you can do a lot of research around that, like we talked about, but there's really no substitute. You don't really know until you get out there and get in market. So I think people kind of just discover there's maybe product market fit, but the market is like smaller than they wanted it to be. And then that can kind of end up being a dead end as well. So I think those are probably the most common ones.
Our students so good at ask questions. If given a chance, what kind of company would you develop now? Where do you see the most opportunity?
Well, for me, the company I'm developing is a fund. And so I want to operate basically like a meta organization, right? That is investing in and amplifying the vision of the founders we work with too. So for me, that's like what I'm excited about personally. It's not really about any specific vision, but it's really about having a platform for like a plurality of visions to like exist and make meaningful impact in the world.
What makes the transition from an engineer, you actually built something yourself, now to an venture capitalist that you enable others?
That's hard some days. There's definitely days I wake up and I wish I could just like work on one thing myself, but I've gone through that evolution many times in my career from being a design engineer to a product manager to being a director executive to being a VC. And every step along the way, I was trading some amount of depth for scope. And for me, I am a voracious learner. I like to jump into new problems and dig into the most interesting thing that's happening at any given time. And it was just a really good fit for my personal skills and interests. And so, yeah, there are those days where I wish I had more focus and more ownership, but I have to remind myself all the other things I get in exchange for that. I get to work with many different companies and many different technologies and many smart, talented founders. That's at the end of the day for me personally is a better trade-off.
What keeps you excited and motivated to start a new business?
I mean, it sounds almost trite, but it's like the impact on the world that can have. I've seen startups change people's lives with the products they develop. I've seen them change people's lives that work at the companies. And so, yeah, I just want more people to experience that. It feels good to work. I like to work. I like to work hard, but I like to work on things that I believe in and that my normal friends and family and people around me like care about too. And so I think just helping people build things they're proud of is just very motivational.
Do you recommend starting our business by using own money or starting business by using funding?
Totally depends. A lot of businesses are capital intensive and you just don't always have enough of your own money to start it. Right. And so for those type of businesses, like you need to raise money. It's important for there to be funding sources for people too, right? Because if you only could start businesses on like friends and family money, there's a lot of bias there in the people that have the nest eggs and the friends and families that can help them start companies. Having funds that can back underrepresented founders is a great way for there to be more diversity of ideas that exist and companies that get backed. So that's really important. But there's lots of awesome stories of companies that were bootstrapped the whole time. And if you can do that, like you maintain a larger equity share in your company, that can result in more financial gains for you and the team. It can result in more control for you and sometimes allow you to take a slower path to success, where a lot of times like the VC funding cycle can be a little bit like rocket fuel, where you raise a lot of money, you're expected to spend it, and you really have to get to another level of company growth so you can raise money and keep going. And if you fall short of that, that can kind of be the end of the road for you too. We try to take a little bit longer view of as a fund ourselves too, and are okay backing people that want to take a little bit more of a thoughtful, methodical approach to company building. But there are some limits to that. They're not there if you're just bootstrapped and self-funded yourself too. So it depends.
Excellent. So specifically for our students, if they're going to pitch in front of VC, college students, right? They absolutely have great ideas, but not really a lot of experience or credibility. What advice would you give to them?
This isn't just like how you should tell your story to VCs, but this is something like you should believe yourself. It should really feel like you're put on earth to do this one thing and it's inevitable. Like you have to go do it because it's so important. You're the perfect person for it. Who else is going to do it if it's not you? That really needs to be like in your bones. Because running a startup is hard. If it's successful, you're probably going to be doing it maybe for 10 years. And so it's a long road and you have to really believe it at that level. And I think that's what people are looking for in you when you're pitching them as well. If you're still in school and you're like, I've been doing this as a side project, I've got another 2 years in school, I'm going to finish and maybe I'll do this or something. It comes across as not being like the burning hair on fire thing that you have to go do with your life too. If you want to be pitching people, you need to be like ready to go. The time has to be now and you have to be like 1,000% dedicated to it.
The commitment, passion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
As college students, if they intended to graduate, would you recommend that the students wait until graduation before they present to VC or do it while they're still in school?
I think you can do either one, but if you're doing it while you're in school, you need to be ready to like drop out of school, basically. Nobody's going to like invest in your company so that you can like maybe pick it up in 6 months or something. Like that's not going to come across as being a high energy, convinced founder. So you can do both, but you got to be ready to drop out if you're still in school.
Do you think it is possible to start a successful company through researching problem to solve? Or is a startup more likely to be successful if you are solving a problem you experienced yourself at firsthand?
Either one, hard to say. I think you often have to do a little bit of both. I think experiencing something firsthand is very powerful and very real, but also has the potential to be a trap in responding too anecdotally to one person's experience. I think if you build something for yourself, you might be a market size of one, right? Like you have to convince yourself that your experience also like maps to more people. That can be through research, that can be through just trying to be in market and sell your product to people. That's kind of a version of research of itself, but I think you definitely need a little bit of both.
How many potential founders do you meet on annual basis?
Oh, that's kind of a crazy number because I do a lot of just like screening pitch decks that get sent over emails and doing Zoom calls and some number of those people I meet in person. But we look at probably 100 pitches for every company we invest in, like order of magnitude wise. That can be a little bit more or less depending on seasonality. So it's a pretty selective process that not a ton of people end up converting in. And that doesn't mean that all those people don't get funded other places too, but those are just the ones that we decide are a really good match for us.
Is there a particular professional background you actually see most entrepreneur originated from?
No, it can really be anything. I think that, we have a bias for people that are going to run pretty lean companies at the beginning. And so usually those people have some technical skills on the team and can build themselves. If it's just a team of like management consultant MBAs who like just have an idea and you're just going to raise money to outsource the development of their product, it's like usually not a good fit for the type of companies we're trying to back. But you get a huge variety of people coming out of school and from a academic or kind of scientific background, people that are more engineering, that are young or old or come from a medical profession, or it's really a very wide set of founders.
Everybody can be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some of the red flags you look for before you invest in a company?
There's some stuff around like corporate hygiene. Sometimes maybe company got started or had some founders that the IP wasn't clean, or there's like a messy cap table where there's people that still own a big portion of the company that are not going to be involved going forward. And so those are definitely things we try to understand because we don't want to invest in companies that have some of those like fundamental problems. A lot of times those things aren't unsurmountable. We help people fix those things all the time, but are really important to look for. There's lots of times we'll actually start to like push and pull on a plan or suggest some strategies differently in the process of due diligence. And then that kind of turns into like working sessions with the founder. We'll look at different operating plans or different hiring plans or different fundraising plans. And through that process, you really get a sense of what it's like to work with the person, and they get a sense of what it's like to work with us too. Through that process, we're like testing the founder just as much as we're testing the plan itself usually, and seeing, do they listen to feedback? Are they open to ideas? Like, are they quick to come up with smart answers that are well thought through? And that kind of gives us a sense of how adaptable they are. The people that only are very rigid on a plan and can only think about this one way of doing things, there's a good chance they're wrong. It's just going to break them and they're not going to be able to adapt and come up with a new plan quickly. So really like pushing on that level of flexibility and their willingness to listen to and incorporate change or feedback in a healthy way is definitely something we look for. At the end of the day, too, it's really an interpersonal thing. Like we end up spending a lot of hours of the day with this person and vice versa, too. So there kind of has to be some level of interpersonal, like I want to spend a bunch of time with this person. And it's a little bit of like a no assholes rule, too. But if it's just somebody I'm not going to look forward to meeting all the time, life's too short, too. So that's a big part of the process as well.
So Tyler, to conclude this session, is there anything that you'd like to share with our audience as a final thought?
Yeah, maybe the biggest thing is just want to communicate my enthusiasm for starting new things. I love people taking the leap of faith to do something new and to rethink products or experiences and how things are done. And so I just want to be a cheerleader for that and help encourage people to do that if they think they're a good fit, and just encourage them that there's a big support structure out there of people willing to give money and advice and contribute their talents and be okay when things fail and talk about what you should learn from them. And we kind of have to go through that painful process. And not everybody succeeds, and the goal is not always to succeed, but to learn and to get better about doing new things over time. So I guess I would just encourage people to start new things. And if I could ever be helpful in that journey for people, it'll be a resource.
Wonderful, Tyler. Thank you so much for meeting with us and sharing your stories with students at the University of California, San Diego. Meeting with good friends, exchanging ideas and perspective across generations, and learning from each other are the best way to celebrate our first anniversary. I hope you enjoy the chat as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Oceanside Chat. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you liked it, please share this podcast and stay tuned for our next episode. We'll see you later.